All right, it is 2 o'clock. We're gonna have some time. We're gonna dedicate some time for anybody in the audience to get 3 minutes to speak up this afternoon. So I really want to get this accomplished, so we can have you guys can get some time. Let's see, who are we missing? Eugene, I know, is out there somewhere. Oh, there he is, right there. And Kurt. Oh, and Kurt. Hey, Kurt. All right. So, we went over the tier. I think we're all in a fairly decent place with that right at the moment. And now we're going to go over, this is the last thing, correct? So I'm going to open it up. If you guys have a specific topic or a specific thing, I knew you would have something for us. Guys.
Okay. I just want to start by saying at the last meeting, we walked away saying we weren't going to suggest a ban of any sort in the draft rule, that when it was going to the commissioners, that it wouldn't be presented that way. But right now, the way it's written, Tier 1 is presented as a ban for personal use. And I'm not sure how we got to that point from previously saying that we wouldn't have a ban.
Okay.
I know the word ban isn't explicitly used, but it's implied by saying no personal use.
Do we have, hold on 1 second, any answer to that, or?
When staff took back everyone's recommendations from the
Can I
tag,
get that door shut? Really hear you. Thank you.
when staff took back the recommendations from the tag, we had our internal meetings and we decided this is the direction we wanted to go.
But I thought we were told by staff when we were here that you would present what we were suggesting as not a ban, and if the commissioners gave direction to say, yes, we need to have a ban, that it would be addressed at that point.
We can let the commissioners know that you guys are not for this. This is what we're going to present as our recommendation.
Okay, we just need, it needs to be clear that the tag does not agree with the ban on personal use for these animals.
Okay.
Provided they meet the facility requirements that were discussed at the last meeting.
All right, so let's make sure, okay. So the tag is not for a ban of personal use. And hold on, if they meet
The facility
The
requirements
facility
discussed at
requirements.
their last meting, not what's in the rule right
Okay,
now,
well-
what's discussed.
all right, Captain Looker first.
I just kind of want to clarify, is that the feeling of everyone in tag or is that just?
I was about to go there, just yeah.
So, what?
Oh, sorry.
I didn't hear what you said.
He said it's not his feeling. I'm gonna get to him next. So go ahead, Sean.
So our perception was, it kind of goes back to that whole thing where a lot of what we've gone over kind of is moot if we get the containment down, because that was the real issue, right? Was containment. We don't want these animals to get loose. We don't want, comments were made about, we don't want people keeping these tier 1 animals in sheds and tin, and dog houses or whatever. And so, our line of thought process was, if we can bolster primary and secondary, now this tertiary containment, then Billy Bob with his tin shed, it's not an issue anymore if it's personal ownership. If he falls into line, right, he or she falls into line with the same standards for containment as an AZA zoo, or as a venom lab, or as a training center, and they are bolstered as we're putting forth, then why does it matter if they're putting that much money, that much effort into bringing their facility up to speed? Why does it matter that they may have them, for personal use, and when you put into, there's verbiage in here about this, the banning of free handling, right? So you're already starting to cut some of the issues, the fat, so to speak, that is the real problem here, which was escape, lack of containment, and free handling in the outdoors, and, which is, in theory, why these escapes happen.
Okay.
So that's our thought process. Instead of saying it's all out ban, bring everybody, make everybody come up to speed on this containment stuff.
Okay. I'm gonna go with the major and then you, Paul. Yes.
I kind of see my presentation going something like this. When we talk about having tier 1 available only for commercial use and no private possession or personal possession, whatever we want to call it, and saying there was not 100% consensus from the tag, and I'm sure you will receive public comment about that after my presentation. Okay, so I will lay that out there. But to Sean's point, one of the questions that Commissioner Pretty asked during their commissioner exchange specifically was, I want to know why people need to have these as pets. Okay, and then Commissioner Yablonsky said, yeah, I want to know that too. So obviously, they have a concern about, and they were broad, they just said venomous snakes as pets. They asked the question why. So as part of our role, we need to give them some options as to why not, some of these snakes won't be pets.
Okay, now I got Paul next. Paul, go.
Yeah, well, let me redact what I did say. What I understood was that tier 1 had to jump through all these hoops and build this hurricane structure. And that's what I thought happened the last time we were
That's
there.
what was discussed
That's right.
And
or recommended.
now it's, you cannot own these at all unless you are doing A, B, or C.
And A, B, or C is commercial use.
Commercial use, labs, or
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. So everybody understands the major's position, though. He's going to get up there and say this is, but the tag wasn't among consensus with staff recommendations. I think that's fair, right? So, Sean.
We have this. Trust me, all. Oh, I'm not. No. We have this.
I'm sorry. I can
that's a
We have
dominate. Man, I gotta slow down.
had to make this argument for decades. And I know this is logic, and sometimes it doesn't get injected into government, but it should. And when people ask questions like, tell us why, or we don't understand why they need a venomous snake as a pet. First of all, the word pet has some strange meanings, right? But you could easily then, on that same exact logic, justifiable and corollary, say, why do people need to keep a large equid that kills more people than all the venomous snakes combined over the last about 50 years? And that's in 1 year. Horses. Why do people need a car that goes 240 miles an hour when the speed limit is 60 miles an hour? And the answer is, because they like it?
Okay. Dr. Parkinson.
I've said that I'm not a real fan of tier 1 species that we have currently being kept by private institutions that don't have, or private individuals that don't have all the secondary containment and all that, or antivenin on site. So I have said that. And Darren made a point a second ago to me saying, Chris, if you have all the training, all the secondary containment, and all of that, why couldn't you have it? And that's a valid argument in my point, or my thought process. So I go back and forth personally on that, but I think as long as you have the training and everything, what?
I kind of have that on my worksheet.
Okay, we're gonna make that as a.
All right, but I want that.
If you have the training, equipment, and everything's necessary, why shouldn't private individuals be able to keep them?
And that was kind of the argument last time, too, for keeping away from the ban. Was if they can meet it, they should be able to keep the animals.
And on that note, a lot of these private pet keepers are AZA zookeepers that keep these animals in their homes under the same standards that they're kept at the zoo. And those people, let's say they're not currently employed with an AZA, they may have been, or they are feeders. These are the people that have the experience that sometimes zoos need to hire. These are the people that breed, right, or they get into it, and then 5 years down the road, they are the suppliers to the
It
venom.
sounds like you got your perfect 3 minutes set up for the commission meeting in
Yeah.
September.
I'll probably be in like Timbuktu, so I'll ditch it
Well,
off.
give it to somebody to
But
say.
you understand what we're saying is there not, there's a misnomer when you say pet owner, right? And that's where the problem occurs when it's presented to the commissioners, because they hear that word pet and they're thinking, hey, my baby baboon buster and I love you, and they're like sleeping with it and they're
It wasn't presented to the commissioner as pets. It was Commissioner Pretty's comment during the commissioner.
I'm not saying you guys present it, I'm saying whoever uses the
But
terminology.
again, that goes to the perception
Right,
piece that we talked about at the first meeting.
right.
And that's a huge hurdle to overcome.
And it is, but I know that us and every single one of you will do your best to overcome that hurdle when you speak.
Right. Now, Dr. Barron.
So I was just going to point out, I mean, from running a research facility, we deal with a lot of animals. I have lots of training. I've been doing this forever. But I would point out that the people that are doing this privately are actually often more invested in those particular species that they're working with. They have more direct experience, and they're the ones usually actually handling their own animals. I don't know when the last time, Chris has been in his snake room milking his snakes, right? Supervise a lot. I'm the same way. So even though I have all this training and experience in these commercial and research facilities, it's not us really that's doing the handling. Now, we're still there supervising, and so in terms of escapes and everything, I don't know if that matters that much, but in terms of safety of the handlers and so forth, I mean, the private people generally seem to know, they're targeting, I want this species, they study that species, they work with that species. And so I think that there's a level of maybe intellectual intimacy there that you don't necessarily get in a research or a commercial setting.
Okay. And then,
And piggyback on what Sean said about many of these individuals being professionals that keep these at home, many of them assist professional institutions frequently, whether it be researchers, whether it be zoos, venom production laboratories. Many of them are bred privately, and they are either donated or sold to these venom laboratories. And obviously if you're donating, that's not considered a sale in the eyes of what was defined as commercial, and no longer would that person be able to do that anymore. They wouldn't be able to feed into that institution. Same with zoos. Many zoos is donated too.
Yeah, and I can attest to that. I mean, through our research, a lot of the keepers in Florida are absolutely great in helping us get samples and things that we would have access to no other way. So it saves us time, money, gives us samples, and we'll look at things. And so we've got hundreds of venom and blood samples, tissue samples from private individuals in the state. And it's been a great resource for us as a research facility.
okay. Kirk.
I add just a couple more comments. We know that folks have been keeping venomous snakes in Florida since at least 1929 when Ross Allen started the Reptile Institute and started milking eastern diamondbacks there. I explained that to the commission. This has been going on for a long time. It's like the cat's out of the barn. And so to start, when we were first told we're going to consider all possibilities, including a ban, my comment was, please don't go there with a ban. I've been very vocal about that from the beginning. It's not enforceable. It's not going to fix anything. It maybe puts a Band-Aid on it and makes it easy for you guys in those handful of cases that you might catch somebody violating the ban. But it's not really fixing the problem, and you lose the ability to control and the knowledge of where those animals are. It's just too late for that at this point. And so the real issue, and I know Lisa brought up that issue, and I know Chairman Jablonski brought it up too, why does anybody want to keep venomous snakes? And we've all had to answer that question in the past. We all try to answer it passionately, and I always turn it on the other person who's asking me, what are you passionate about? And is there anybody in the world that thinks that hitting a golf ball is crazy, or that hunting is crazy? I'm not a hunter, so I don't get that, but there's a lot of folks that get charged up and excited about hunting season. So everybody has their passions, and this is a passion that, it's a small number, and we're a huge minority, and so if this ever became a public issue, we probably would lose, and we don't want to go there either. But we've always prided ourselves in working with the commission, long before most of you guys were involved in these kind of issues. And we've always gone up in front of the commissioners when there have been rule changes, and we've said we've worked with the commission, we appreciate the opportunity, and this is what we've achieved together. And so I'm sensing now that there's a very strong possibility you're going to present something, and you're going to say at least some of the folks on the tag are opposed to this. And I don't think that's ever happened, not that I can remember, and I've lived here since 1989. I hate to see it happen now over this. I really think that we ought to come together on this issue and figure out what is the true problem here. It was cobra escapes. And if we can address escapes of venomous snakes, all of them across the board, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, if we have to have a tier system and make everybody have secondary containment for all of those, then I think the concept of a ban is completely unnecessary.
Okay, let me capture that last part because I think that's somewhat new. I haven't heard that particular part before, which is if the concept of having a tier system and secondary, or the new secondary enclosure, the new rules on keeping them should suffice in not having a ban for animals. Okay, so let's, did you get that? So because I've heard you guys have popped around that quite a bit, but that's the most clear I've heard that yet so far. And so, Phil.
I may have missed it, but did Kara explain what the rationale was for the ban on tier 1 species? What was the reasoning? Well, it is.
It's a ban.
Okay,
There's no way I can move down here from Indiana if I had 3 of these snakes and keep these animals. It would be a ban for me coming to Indiana and keeping these animals for personal use. So it is a ban list.
It was an agency decision.
I understand that, but what was the rationale is what I'm asking.
The rationale
The reasoning.
is about a personal possession. It's about a neighborhood.
There it is.
So because it might be in a congested area is the rationale?
Yes.
Can we capture that? The rationale can be to, for, the rationale would be to keep tier 1s out of
Yeah, secondary containment.
congested urban areas.
So on that thought,
I got you next.
I mean, I see where you guys go. We get it. I mean, I get it, but we're gonna see it. That rationale, keeping them out of congested areas or urban areas. Where's your university located?
So it's about to say.
Where's your facility located? Yeah. They're already in there, and they're in there commercially. So again, this actually bolsters our argument that it's not about the possession in a specific area. Maybe multi-dwellings in that area. I don't think his university lab is in a multi-dwelling unit.
I don't know, my students sleep in there.
But if we can bring everybody up to speed on containment, there's no difference between his facility, my facility, his facility, or anybody else's that comes up to speed on containment. And that's the real issue, true or false? Leave out multi-dwelling stuff, we did that.
I understand what you're saying.
Very good, John. Okay, Phil.
May I ask if that's just being driven by public input?
No, it's,
What was the question? I'm sorry, I was talking.
If that decision
driven by
was,
public input. Like after, who said it, like someone said, if this became, I think it was you, if this became a public matter, the public is not going to want these animals.
well, so would hunting, fishing, and a whole lot of
So,
other things.
that's what I'm saying, if this were a public matter, they would say, no snakes for anybody. Truly,
And-
you know this.
And again,
That's what they would say.
we understand your position, and again, my balancing act I have to do, and
I got you, Ken.
And you know, the concerns, and I understand that, yes, it's a ban. Everybody says the net ban. It's actually the Net Limitation Act that limited net sizes and that type of stuff. This limits who could have proposed tier 1 snakes. It's not a ban. So, you know, just keep that in mind. But, you know, we also had the conversation about, and I get where Tony's coming from, you know, prohibited. We didn't want to go down that road. We spent about an hour talking about it, and it was the group's idea to say, instead of having a prohibited list, let's really harden the structure. Let's put this secondary containment. Let's discuss the pit tag issue to try to dispel some of that interest in the prohibited list. And like I said, I will say that if the tag group says that unanimously we don't agree with this being for commercial use only, I will say that at the presentation. I will say it. However, you know, based upon comments from staff, this is a staff recommendation. This is
Is that a
draft.
law enforcement recommendation, or is this coming from other departments?
It comes from a whole bunch of folks.
So more than just law enforcement?
Yes.
So on that,
Hold on.
Law enforcement only looks at whether something's enforceable or not. Okay, really. I mean, that's our biggest concern. Do we have what we need to enforce? But, you know, because this falls under a section that's within a division of law enforcement, I mean, you know, Kristen's here because HSC has an interest in this. You know, there's definitely people in the Office of Executive Director that are getting phone calls and emails that have interest in this. So this isn't just the captive wildlife environmental investigation section. This is a lot of input from a lot of people in the agency. So,
All right. Ken?
And just, there's very few venomous reptile licensees out there that also doesn't have a commercial license. So I don't know how many this will affect, but I think it won't affect the greater Mania.
I also
Also,
change that definition of commercial though. I can change the definition here.
no, you'd have to have some commercial activity, but I think most of you do, don't you? If you barter, exchange, or,
I've had an ESC license forever, but I generally don't sell animals.
well, if you barter, exchange, or trade, that is sales.
I generally don't do that.
Okay, hold on. I got Sean, I got Tony, Eugene, and then John.
so let's go back to this vote thing. This keeps coming up. And this is a safe zone.
Oh, you're gonna say something good now.
This is a safe zone. So, is there anybody on this tag sitting here right now that, I know you were confused and then you pulled back your thing, right?
Well, and I'm still, Phil's educating me as we go.
Okay,
But if you're not exhibiting or doing something with them, then I'm right there.
all right, we don't have a definition of something, so,
Well,
I kinda get
there's
what
a
you mean,
definition
but-
right there.
so-
It says,
so you're on the fence,
yeah.
okay? Is there anybody else on the tag that's here that feels with all this pumped up primary, secondary, now tertiary swing door containment, that anybody and everybody who has a facility that comes up to speed as the same as ours can't have these things?
So we have one on the fence. Anybody else?
I think as long as you meet secondary and I guess now tertiary standards.
Tertiary.
Well,
The door.
The safety
door.
door.
Or self-closing.
Right, but I think I'm leaning towards okay.
And it's like, you're talking about, and to acknowledge and try to address your something is like Darren said, is that they do something. They don't have to sell and breed snakes to add to the overall commercial base or value of venomous snakes. They can send him venom. They can send him shed skins for genetic research. They can send blood samples. They can send, right?
So then why wouldn't they just be commercial?
Because they're not selling anything. They
Under the-
give these things away.
I'm asking
So
for clarity,
many-
I'm asking the question.
So many of these keepers that just are still involved because they're so passionate about these animals. And if these standards, if they're up to standard, then I just don't see how we can brush them aside because they do contribute. They do contribute. They send blood samples and venom samples and shed samples and, you know, and.
Well, could,
And that's a great way of explaining it, as long as they're doing something.
so then why wouldn't we just, if you're donating shed skin samples, why wouldn't they just be considered commercial?
That's not part of the proposed definition for.
Okay, well, I understand that. But I mean, that's also a discussion that you could probably have, right? I mean, we could say, everybody who's doing those things, it's not personal, but if you wanna, if you're donating and doing stuff, why not just bump them to commercial? Is that not a, I mean, I'm just asking the question.
I mean, we can have the discussion, but if you're gonna say someone who just donates their skins, then that's anybody.
Okay, and they, but they would have to go through the process of becoming a commercial, person, right? Okay, I'm just throwing it out there, so, yeah, I got you, and who was I missing over here? Okay, Tony.
Okay, I'm gonna back up a little bit to what the major said about law enforcement looking at these as being enforceable. And I think you hit the nail on the head, all right? I understand that these rules need to be enforceable. And looking at this tier system, and I don't mean to call any offense on any investigator or anything like that, all right? It's not things personally. How many of you, if somebody went in and mixed up all the cage cards in a building, could walk in and say, this is this genus, this is this genus, this is this genus, and know for sure, with certainty, that those are within each tier? Will you really be able to enforce that when you walk in and know people are keeping the appropriate tier? Because I could easily have something that is a tier 2 animal with a tier 3 license and say, you know, this is one of these tier 3 animals.
Not instantaneous.
Okay, Rick? So I'm just thinking from an enforcement standpoint, you know, and I don't expect you guys to.
I don't even think Steve could, and I don't even think you guys could.
And I completely agree. And that's what I'm saying, from an enforcement standpoint, because I understand you guys don't just deal with venom, you deal with all the other different types of captive wildlife investigations and everything. And I'm just trying to think from an enforcement standpoint, how you guys are able to keep a good handle on making sure people are keeping what they're supposed to keep. All right? You know, and I think that's kind of why originally everyone was like, I don't know if we should go that direction, because I don't know if we can enforce it.
All right, Rick?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. We are a jack of all trades. We're not an expert in anything because we're not leaving your venomous reptile facility, we're not a crocodilian facility, primate facility, bird. I mean, I can tell the difference between a tiger and a cougar on the bottom, right?
I hope so.
However, if we end up adopting this tier system, one of the things I am gonna have to do in order to be effective is when I do my annual inspections, I'm gonna be taking an inventory of everything you've got. And I'm gonna have to take the time to positively identify all of those different species and maintain that database, so when I walk in the next time, I will print up that old inventory report. I mean, it's a lot of homework on my part,
Well,
no
the
matter
question is,
about it.
does FWC have the resources for that? Because, to be honest with you, you guys have a hard time being able to keep up with all the inspections that have to happen now just for what we have. Not to mention trying to increase resources to the point where you guys have to do all this extra homework, look into it. You guys are stretched thin, and I get it. You know, government entities have, especially, you know, political and tenure in a Republican state, a natural resource agency has trouble getting money sometimes, and I get that. So you guys are already stretched thin.
But money, hopefully the money chases the need, that's the way it usually works. And if we can establish that we need more manpower, maybe that'll fall on listening. It still doesn't
We do our best to adapt and overcome. I think we do have a couple folks that, you know, are here. They might not be there where you are, but they're here. So if you had a newer investigator go to your place and, you know, we still have top instincts And, you know, we can tell when somebody's, you know, kind of trying to pull the wool over our eyes, and okay, thanks, Tony. Everything looks good. And then I go to Bob O'Horo and say, I think this guy's feeding me a line. Let's go back and visit him. And then we get Bob in there, somebody with a little bit more experience. So now we're training the newer officer. It just takes time.
More fun
Okay.
than you say it is with the picture.
Yeah, getting back to what Rick said, it's gonna be a lot of photographs and going back and doing our homework and making sure that everyone's playing.
All right. So I think this is a healthy discussion. I don't want to stifle this discussion, but I want to make sure that this isn't the only discussion we're going to have on this rule, unless this is the discussion.
Oh, there's a lot more in here.
Okay. So if you all are okay with where we're sitting right now, if we need to come back to this afterwards, fine, but I don't want to shortchange the rest of the rule if we don't. We got other things to talk about.
I'll talk to no one else that's not first. I just got the comment thing here.
Yeah, go ahead.
First off, with this 1 July thing,
Sorry. What's the nomenclature?
What number is this?
this is 007.
This is the 007. This is the big rule.
1 July, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think legally FWC can implement a rule that is prior to the day that rule is finalized. Like asking people, saying people before that date would be grandfathered, but people after are not. I don't think you can do that without it being the day of the final rule.
Okay.
I can answer that. Legally we can, but I think we're said it's not.
Okay.
Okay.
It might have been a good idea to put like a, blank spot in there and put date of final rule or something like that, because that definitely makes
Legally we
it.
can, we're not going to.
Okay.
Is there, just, so you guys are going to change it, but there's no.
We're not going to backdate it, correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. So let's make sure we catch it so they can remind themselves to change that.
There's a bunch of those. Standard. July 1st is.
Yeah.
Okay, and so July 1st is scattered throughout,
It's in a couple spots.
it's in a couple spots? Okay, well, just so you guys, yeah. All right, was there some, I know you guys were talking, is there something else? No?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think we kind of addressed the tax already.
Okay.
Go back to that.
Hold on, there was one
Sorry.
language change. If you can scroll up just a tiny bit more, because it's that last sentence that's visible. Under 2B, not have been convicted of any violation of venomous reptile, blah, 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 or any violation involving cruelty to animals, or any violation involving importation of wildlife within 3 years of the date of application, or termination of probationary period resulting from conviction, whichever is longer. I've never seen that in criminal law ever. That last bit of language is essentially extending beyond the conviction date, whatever period of time somebody is paying the price for committing that crime. So I don't know. I think that's a
Okay, so then how do we capture that on the thing?
well, it's an additional penalty that you guys are seeking to tack on there, but I don't. Hopefully it's not going to ever apply to any of us. But
At least 3 years. If probation extends beyond 3 years, if we're going to go with what the probationary time is, what we're saying. So at least 3 years.
Oh,
That's what
okay.
we're saying.
Is that not clear? Yeah, so it sounds like you guys are okay with it, but it's not clear.
well, if the conviction is
When he was
today,
Yeah,
okay, so 3 years the clock runs, but that person's been on probation for 5 years, and you would extend it out for the 5-year period. And I'm just telling you, I've never seen that in criminal law before. That seems like
The
packing
probation
the
is for 5
penalty
years.
onto the penalty.
Well, the terms of probation would that prohibit you from doing things that you would normally be able to do until that probation is terminated. This would be one of those things. That's not unusual in the legal world. That's actually it's pretty standard.
And then, I think we very rarely are going to get a 3-year probation term for our rules. So it's kind of,
Well, but it's not really moved if it becomes law, if it's thrown in there. I've just never seen it before, and I'm wondering what the purpose is. You know, there has to be a compelling state interest if you're gonna take people's rights away.
Well, we
So
can't,
if
we
you're
can't
gonna throw that
administratively, we can't administratively say 3 years, but a judge says, I know what your rules say, but I want him not to possess any venomous snakes for 5 years.
Right.
This gives us, yes, okay, that's good, we understand, Your Honor. We can't, I mean, that's a court order,
That's right.
so that's where that comes in. In the rare event it should occur.
Okay. You satisfied with that answer anyway, or?
You know, the answer is what it is. I just don't like the language and I don't understand the purpose of putting it in there. It feels like it's just tacking on an additional penalty, and I don't know how many times this has ever happened before, but again, when you're talking about removing individual civil rights, there has to be a compelling state interest to do that. And I don't know what that is. It just seems like,
Sure, it's a
It's a privilege.
The judge says you're on probation, can't have these for 5 years. That's no big deal, that's fine, right?
yeah, I don't think there's anything you can do about that.
And I think that's what they're trying to say, maybe the language isn't the best language.
How about doing this? Look at that, draft, write something that makes it more sense to you, and then give it to them. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So if there are no other questions from that, let's keep going.
One question on the 1,000 hours.
Okay.
Just for documenting it, does it need to be a little clearer? We've gotten.
Which one is that? Sorry.
Go up to.
Up. Tier number 1,
A, down.
Down. 18 years, one A.
Actually, further down.
It's further.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right, hold on, we'll come back up for a second. It's 3 something, or?
Yeah, right there.
Okay.
So on,
They have to go.
where we at?
I see where we are.
I'm just wondering if we need to have more clarification on how those hours are documented. Because we've had in the past, is it employment history? Is it a spread, we've done some spreadsheets in 15-minute increments. Do we need to kind of clarify how that needs to be documented?
Yeah, we're developing a form for the experience hours, so we know exactly how it's going to be laid out.
And
Okay.
it does have something that says employment records can be
Later on.
used as well.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a proposed.
Okay, so there's this form that's in development, and there's also employment records, right? Those are things. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, down at I-4.
Okay. We skipped a bunch, but I'm gonna come back to this in a
I
second.
want to continue talking about hours right now. Mike, or do you-
Yeah, well, since we're on the hours, let's stick with the hours for just a second, we'll move back up in a minute. And Tony was first, and then, okay.
I was just gonna say, one thing that we may wanna take into consideration for the overall hours, if we're saying tier 1 are the animals that are the most difficult to work with, and tier 3 are the least out of all of these, or as far as the matrix is concerned, it should be more of an lowered requirement for tier 3 hours-wise, and increased requirement for tier 2 and tier 1. Because we're talking about 1,000 hours working with tier 3 animals, like I said, that are supposedly not the most difficult to work with. I'm not saying that we need to change this overall structure of 1,400. I think 1,400 hours is more than sufficient to capture working with venomous reptiles. I think maybe tier 3 needs to be moved down to maybe like 500 or something like that.
Okay, let's get that suggestion.
This was already submitted. We already
We
submitted.
talked about this,
Yeah,
but
and it was submitted
More hours for
with
tier-
our matrix and
tier
everything.
2 and tier 1.
And basically it came down to 500 hours apprenticeship under FWC approved VRE, 1 licensee, blah, blah. And then for the tier 2, we had 250 hours. And then, of course, the tier systems they got different names, but it all lays out the same. Pretty much is 150-hour apprenticeship, right? So as you grade up, you go from 150 to 250 to 500. And then there was also we had discussed the training, the recognized training and certification courses. Which would then be, in lieu of, as well. So that was submitted previously from the last.
And what you're saying is it's not in this? Right?
Yeah, it doesn't,
Okay.
all this. This is actually almost, one, the numbers are wrong and it's inverted. So you end up having 1,000 hours under tier 3, which are basically your.
Right, I got it.
Yeah, we're saying you need the most for tier 1.
Okay, is there a reason why we went this way, Rick?
I just want to ask if we've been given instructions to tighten up the safety parameters of venomous reptile possession. And 1,000 hours has been in existence for 35 years. Why now would we say no for these venomous reptiles? Because I think the non-experts are not going to make a distinction between how dangerous an animal is. Just going to say it's a venomous snake, and for the last 35 years you've had to have 1,000 hours to possess it, and now we're going to tell you you need 150 hours? I'm not sure that makes a successful argument.
I don't think it's been 35 years.
Well, since the 70s, right? When was it?
No. I moved here in '89 and there was no hour requirement at that time. So it was sometime in the 90s.
It was before I came on board, which was 22 years ago, so.
All right.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So I see the two different things. You guys are saying step up from lower hours to higher hours, and then I see probably FWC saying if you start out with if you have a whole bunch of hours in the beginning, 1,000 hours, and then tier 2 is less hours and tier 1 is less hours, correct? And it's because you got most of your hours in the first go around. And so, hold on, let me go with you first, go ahead, you go ahead.
There's two things. One, I would much rather have the individuals dealing with the tier 1 animals to have the most training hours than dealing with the tier 3.
That's what I'm saying.
No, I understand that. Just from a training standpoint, because the tier 1 animals are vastly different behaviorally, venom-wise, all of that, than a tier 3. And you can't figure that out based on a written exam.
Okay,
How many hours do you recommend?
yeah.
So what I just put in here, because I was playing with this, whether they're not going to agree with it, but 500, 500, 500. So at each level, it goes up by 500.
Oh.
And
Well, that's
as you said,
1,500, right?
So
That's
it's
1,500, but 1,400 was reasonable.
I'm just.
I get it, let me go, Sean.
So again, and I know a lot of this has been lost because others have lives. When we all put this together, we submitted 500 for tier 1, 250 for tier 2, and 150 for tier 1. And when we were here last, FWC also agreed that the hours that existed right now were way too much. And that's why we discussed all this and put this into place. And when you come in under a tier 3, if that's the grading you're looking at, if you come in under tier 3, remember these are animals, you're talking about, very small and very moderate animals. You're talking about coral snakes. You're talking about, animals that are not highly specialized as far as training and handling goes. And then you're grading up. When you hit tier 1, a lot of these species, not only is their toxicity greater, not only maybe they're heavier body, they're more hyperactive, but they're specialized training because you get into animals that are arboreal, that have absolutely specialized natural histories that you have to accommodate for in the handling and the training.
So do you recommend, do you agree with the 555 or no?
No, I think I agree with what we came up last time, 152.
Okay, let me go ahead. Dean.
To answer Rick's question in the back there, and the majors talked about it, everybody else has, we all know that 1,000 hours is bogus, and it's been a laughing joke in the industry and the agency for a long, long time, but nobody's had the fortitude to step up to the plate and do and make the life-producing decisions that brings everybody into a sensible compliance with all the other arguments that we've had. All that being said, you know, I mean, I'm not in favor of the tier system, but if we're talking about the tier, that if we're looking at tier 3, 2, and 1, you know, realistically, 300 hours max, 200 hours, 100 hours, and I am really being incredibly generous, not that anybody probably cares, but just for the sake of being something that is manageable, realistic, I mean, that's a ton of time. You know what I'm saying? You only need 40 hours to fly a plane, okay? So,
Because remember, we're actually at, what, 3,000 hours, depending on how you want to separate out, 4,000 hours.
they charge 2 years.
And that's what we talked about, that you guys agreed, okay, this is, you know, that's out of control, and it will drive, we already hear the chatter, we already hear the talk, it's happening. It drives people underground.
Okay, Ken?
The reason why the 1,000 hours experience was at tier 3, because that was the original license. They never had a license before. That's their original license, so they need 1,000 hours experience. They're being tutored by someone who already has tier 2 and tier 3 to get their tier 2 license. I said tutored.
We included that.
And that's why the 200 hours and the 200 hours, because it's a progressive thing. What's not in here is, if I already have the experience with tier 1, can I come in with a tier 1 license? And I don't see that anymore. But that's the reason why we start up at 1,000 hours. And we can discuss the 1,000 hours is kind of too high, but that's the reason why the first level was 1,000.
But you've already admitted that 1,000 hours is too high, and to have 1,000 hours experience with something that lives in your backyard that people want to keep, you're going to keep anyway. One of the most potentially dangerous bites is an eastern diamondback. I mean, even the chairman has said, I don't have a problem with the diamondback gets loose, it already lives here.
Well, that's a tier 2.
It's just
Sean?
all hypothetical tier system, okay? Like
So-
the major said, we ain't poor country yet.
So I understand the logic from your standpoint, but the logic from our whatever standpoint is, if you only need, for these very simple, I don't want to say simple, but for tier 3, if you only really need 150 hours, that's a lot of hours if you're actually doing it. That's a lot of hours, right? And you force 1,000 hours, it'll drive people on the ground. But not only that, if you need 150 hours to handle this thing, and you do 1,000 hours, that will not do you any good to proceed to step 2 or step 1, because it is specialized training, right? It's overkill. And I see where you guys went. You're like, okay, they're just new, but you know, it's like giving a kid a training wheels and then putting him on until he's 21 years old. You know, it's just not needed. And that's why we came up with the opposite. It's 150 needed, and then you step to tier 2, which is additional specialized training at 250 hours. I'm not saying we're stuck at 150, 250, but it's more reasonable. And then when you hit tier 1, it's 500 hours because they are specialized handling techniques, because they're arboreal, because they're larger, because they're more toxic.
So
Because they're,
you guys, there's an argument that's being made to invert.
Here, here.
Okay. We'll just keep beating this one down, so I think they've got it. All right, any questions from over here? No? All right, I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna go back up, okay, so we're gonna get off the hours for a minute. And somebody stop me, we were here. I know when we talked about the, well, I remember seeing these. Yeah,
I'd like to talk about seasoning.
You can get Kristen to let you have seats.
All right, Kristen, you and I are best friends from here on out. Here we go. So when we come down to, I've got it under E. Right at the bottom. Yeah, there you go. You're already on E.
Yeah.
Any licensed person possessing tier 1 venomous reptiles for personal use on or before July 1st, 2016. That seems like you guys are predating.
We
already missed that.
Oh,
I missed it.
Yeah, you were sleeping. We already did, so that is going through a change. We don't know what date's gonna be put in there, but it's not gonna be that day.
I think it's important to know that if we go down this route of saying you have to have it at that date for tier one, if you get individuals who, I mean, even like a zoo, for example, and they have someone on staff, and at the time, they don't have any mambas, and they're not eligible for a tier one license until someone goes through this hourage requirement again, or training to be able to have those tier one animals. Based on that, even though they're a commercial entity and everything, they still have to meet the experience requirements that are stated within that. So if they don't have those animals as of that date, they're gonna even have issues coming. So, it's gonna cause some problems.
Verbiage also causes problems with regard to this, and it says, for the remainder of the life of such reptiles. Right, so if those of us that already are permitted or grandfathered in, that grandfather didn't dissipate. So I think you've got, I'm sure that would change too. The max will still be 2 years, July 1st, 2018. So we've got a blinking light. So if those animals die, and, and or July 2018 comes around, then what do you do? We already have the experience, and it doesn't account for births, right, that occur while in possession. I mean, so then do we time that out on the, because they weren't really in our possession? I think there's a lot of considerations with that verbiage that aren't taken into account for.
Okay, are you following what he's saying?
I think so. I think we're saying the birth count for the grandfather in, is that what you're asking?
No, so it reads, basically personal use if they possess them on or before July 1st, 2016, but no going to change, shall be eligible for a permit to possess such reptiles for personal use for the remainder of the life of such reptiles. What that does not take into account is if they continue to have births, which is going to happen. What are you going to do with those animals? Because they're in the possession, they have the experience, right? So when this goes into law, are you going to be like, everybody goes on prophylactic? I mean, I joke about it, but it's an issue.
So, go ahead, Ken.
If this were to be implemented, then you could not breed those specimens anymore. You could not keep producing.
Well, they could be gravid at the time, and there's cases of Department of Justice snakes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bag of issues.
All right, hold on, let me go with the major first.
I was gonna say, basically, your inventory would be locked in, and if you did have a accidental birth, you'd have to give them away.
Could be an inventory.
And actually, those people that possess radiator sliders, they have to addle their eggs if they have any of that, if they're in possession of.
Well, you got live bearers.
Yeah.
Can't have legs with a live bearer.
No, you'd have to use them as another format, I suppose.
So, okay.
All right, so I had him first.
Okay.
I'm on a different.
We'll get back to that.
And then I've got Kristen in the back.
I'm on this topic, on the topic of grandfathering, and there's some additional language, I think, below this, we'll probably get to in a second, that I have a problem with. I started with the Venomous license, and all you did was send in $5. And then somewhere along mid-1990s, I think they added 1,000 hours, we were grandfathered in. And it's became then 1,000 hours, sometimes subsequently for each family. But if you already had that Venomous license, you were grandfathered in. Now, basically, what you guys are seeking to do is really limit that grandfathering. And I'm wondering why that is for those of us who have had a blanket Venomous license, if you will, with all families since day one. Why are you going to squeeze in limitations on that today? And what is the rationale? And I'm not sure that that would hold up in court if somebody challenges it. But what is really the rationale for precluding people from breeding animals that they can have?
Major, Captain.
I defer. Why couldn't we just do a simple grandfather?
Would you have an answer to that?
I think that historically, this is very similar to what we did with ROC. So people could keep those animals, but they weren't breeding them anymore. They were grandfathered in with those specific individuals for personal possession. And this was kind of following that same history. If somebody's breeding them, like a reptile, I'm assuming you're doing something with them. You're bartering them, you're trading them. So then you're not in personal possession. It's not for personal possession. It's for sales. It's for some other purpose. It's for bartering. It's for trade, whatever that is. And so And I think that time frame they were talking about, and Kara, correct me if I'm wrong, so I'm just, from having the discussions, my understanding was is that, you know, if you want to continue to keep those, yes, you clearly would probably have the experience, so the documentation would be easy to do, but we want you to get your facility up to speed so that you're in compliance for any new individuals that you acquire. I think that's the intent.
Okay.
But so it's the historical, very similar to what we did with ROCs. There's a handful of people out there still with ROCs, ROC licenses that still have them for personal possession. One of my staff members has one. So, well, it's Sarah's staff member. But I think that's the intent, was like what Rob was saying, or the major was saying, like kind of freezing what that inventory is. If you're breeding them or if something happens, then you're doing some other activity with them generally. And
Okay.
that was what the intent was.
I've got Phil and then you.
We didn't include breeding as commercial in the definition. Yep, so, but you're breeding.
Okay.
As opposed to the reptiles of concern, license or permit, whatever it was, you didn't have to have any experience to have those animals. So someone could have one of the big pythons or Nile monitors or whatever's on that list. They didn't have to go through all the hoops to have the animals in the first place. Whereas here, you already had to prove that you have this level of experience to have these animals. So it's not exactly apples and apples. Does that make sense?
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, Eugene. And then,
But going back to what you're talking about with conditional species, and the whole process of coming up with that rule, you know, we had so much pressure on us from the governor to the commission, and we had to come up with some way to maintain an exit strategy so that people would not turn animals loose. And by making them a conditional, being biosecurity driven with an ESC license, we were legally able to say to the government, we have banned the public sale of these animals, except for those people that have a commercial license, ESC license, and meet the biosecurity, you know, evacuation plan, all these other things. And Phil's exactly right. It wasn't about your experience as much as it was for containment and confinement, and then having an exit strategy. And then the federal government came along and really screwed up the state of Florida, but we won't go there. And I don't see why we can't do the same thing with the Venomous. It worked for them. Why can't it work for us? Because everything I hear outside of this stuff is you're trying to put a noose on this thing and put people out of business little by little by little by over-restricting to the point where we're going to say, the heck with it, and then we're going to have people going to ground, and we, the commissioners don't want that to happen. We need to have and maintain an existing level of relationship. It's worked with the reptiles of concern / conditional species, but the understanding, the indoctrination, the format, the acceptance from the public as well as the commissions, as well as other agencies, that we have an exit strategy. We have a system so that we can get those animals out of the United States. Or if you sell them in state, it goes from permitted person to permitted person, 6 month, you know, inventory, blah, blah, blah. So there is a traceable, accountable, you know, relational inventory in process, and it works. Is it perfect? No, but it works. And I don't see why we can't go with what has been working, just to take baby steps if you really want to grow the relationship, you know, and make changes. But if you have no intent other than to put people out of business, then I'm wasting my breath.
okay. Yes, sir?
You know, just historically, the venomous reptile rules were started in 1953.
Ross Allen.
Okay.
And you needed a $5 license then.
You did, and historically, I'll tell you this, you did historically and in truth, when that $5 license was in existence, that's when I started doing this work. And although I think the family requirement for 1,000 hours was still in existence, the old administration, which had long since retired, unlike doing it with mammals, and particularly cats and all that, they did, and primates, they really didn't enforce the 1,000-hour experience rule per family. You document 1,000 hours for a venomous reptile license, and you spent $5, and then I get an inspection, go check your cage, and you could, once you got that license, you could possess any venomous reptile on the planet.
Okay.
That's what it was in the mid-90s.
Okay, I really need us to get moving forward here, so let's keep going down. This is all very good conversation, but try and keep us on time, sorry. Too far? Got it. Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, that's the section that I was really talking about, but it's the same rationale in the previous section about grandfathering. This is really putting a limitation on those of us who've had like the general cross-board license forever.
Okay, are you guys are understanding his argument there? Okay. All right, so.
On number